limiting the use of an
Limiting-
aquifer.
Yeah,
Aquifer.
a lot of use, yeah.
Right now, what we got going on, I'm sure you heard up there, was the overuse of the aquifer out there that Seneca's using right now. Whether we should be having illegal grounds to stand to limit that. I don't, that's kind of what we're getting at, isn't it?
I think that's what you're basically getting at least that's what I thought at one point.
What,
You know,
I think
because-
what brought it up actually was, after I thought about it longer, was the one pond. There was a citizen that was fussing because their pond has gone down or gone dry because of, somebody pulling too much water out of a local aquifer.
Yeah, and using it for commercial use and polluting it and then trying to re-inject it in the ground somewhere else.
Yeah,
Well said.
but their pond, they were saying that their pond was ruined because of pulling it out, so.
And the problem we have out here is we're on a spring that's on National Forest land. And it's pumped up to our water tank and it's gravity fed out. Well, DEP right now, they've been fighting this for like the last 10 years. They don't want any more than 25 people, not houses, on that spring. And we've been fighting them tooth and nail. We just keep it up, but they're, we're one little hair length away from having everybody drill a well. And we know darn well there's not good wells out here. We drill wells, we're not gonna have good drinking water.
Well, but there again, if the federal government's wants to limit your usage of water, why can't the township limit use of other people using the water?
Well, we're just worried if we write in something about how, we won't even take township funds for our water out
I
here.
understand the whole situation, but I'm just saying there again, if it's getting into the aquifer, whether it be a bottling plant or something like that come in and want to start extracting water from the ground and then depleting it from township citizens.
Well, you would think DEP wouldn't let them do that.
Yeah, well.
Well, yeah, really,
It's the
you
same.
got a point.
If we decide not to progress down this and something else does arise, we can still amend the charter at a later date.
True.
Because it's kind of seeming like we're talking amongst ourselves right now that this is.
Right, there's so much confusion on what we need
Yeah.
with that. Maybe we should put it as a further consideration. A future
I wish we
consideration.
had the guy that runs our water. I mean, I'm just a backup bookkeeper for the water out here. I wish we had the guy that actually runs our water out here at this meeting, but unfortunately, for reasons unknown, he wasn't able to attend, so.
So we want to
Well,
table that for future consideration, not,
why don't we
Yes.
table it till next meeting, till I have a chance to talk with
How
John?
about we
Okay.
could all have a meeting maybe Brian Pump would come up
Um,
from our water.
he has people at his house right
Oh,
now, I don't
okay.
know.
because we don't want to protect James City's water source only
I just don't know
to,
how much time. he has
destroy
now. He's
Russell
had
Cities
people in
and
his house
Highlands.
For 2 weeks now.
that's
I don't
not the
know.
purpose here.
I agree with
I can see if,
you. Yeah,
you know,
Yeah, we can table it for now. We
okay,
we still got
all
time.
right, give me a chance to talk to him.
Yeah, from our perspective, we need to know what specifically you're concerned about, what the activity is, what you're trying to protect, because there's a whole bunch of rabbit holes that you can go down with the water protection stuff. If you're trying to limit it, say, for commercial use, well, does that mean then the James City Cafe can't use water at their place? So there's just a lot of considerations to think through, depending on, we've heard a bunch of different stuff, but we need to be clear on what it is you're trying to do so that we can craft language that would get at it. And again, you can amend it later, but if you think on it and come with some specifics in the next meeting, we can try to do some more research, but depending on the extent and the scope of what you want, we may not have time to get the research done by the August 30 deadline. So, table till next meeting, is that?
Yes.
Yeah, at least.
Natalie and Thomas, in section 402, they're tabling the discussion right now. There's a lot of different things going around over here about what they're concerned about with water protection. So there's going to be some research done between now and next week by the commissioners to get some specifics. And then with the understanding that they may just table it for future amendment later on. So that's where we're at with 402, is just tabling it for now.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'm gonna run through a couple of these relatively quickly. This is language that is important and is stuff that needs to be read in detail, but most of this language is brought over from the ordinance, so it's not anything new. So section 403, it's talking about state and federal authority. It's stating that any state or federal agency that issues a permit to a corporation to engage in an activity that would violate the rights of this charter is not valid within the township. So that was language that was in the ordinance, basically saying the federal or the state regulatory agencies can't legalize activities that would violate our rights. We're gonna fight about that. Section 404 is summary offenses. That's stating what the punishment would be for any corporation or government that violates the provisions of this charter. So it outlines what the punishments are. Section 405, standing for township and residents, basically stating that any person living in Highland Township may enforce the provisions of this charter in court. Gives people standing so that, you know, the courts can't say, well, you're not allowed to bring an action here because only the township can, or something like that. It's basically saying that the people that live here have standing to enforce the charter. 406, enforcement of natural community and ecosystems rights. That's also stating that ecosystems do have the right to have their rights protected within the community. And it talks a little bit about what that means, what it would look like in court. Please read through it. The rights of nature stuff we're not talking through a lot, and so I'm happy to go into it in more detail, but it is stuff that you want to make sure that you understand and are behind because it's a new, relatively new legal theory and concept. Section 407, intervention in lawsuits. This is riffing on the right in section Article 1, allowing folks to intervene in lawsuits if the township is not representing the interests of the people. Questions on any of that to this point? Okay. Section 408, enforcement of state laws. I'm going to read this because it's important. It says all laws adopted by the legislature of the state of Pennsylvania or by Congress and rules adopted by any state or federal agency shall be the law of Highland Township only to the extent that they do not violate the rights or prohibitions of this charter or limit the authority of Highland Township or the people of Highland Township to adopt and enforce greater protections of these rights than afforded by the Pennsylvania legislature or by Congress. So it's saying that state and federal law is still the law within the township as long as that law is not being used to violate the rights of the people that live here. That if state or federal law is being used in a way that would be violating our rights, that that's illegitimate and we have the authority in the township to do what's right to protect ourselves. So it's basically, you know, saying we accept and agree with the state and federal law as long as it's there to protect our rights. And when it doesn't protect our rights, then we need to do it ourselves. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. 409 is the interpretation. That's just instructions to the court of how the court should interpret the terms of this charter. Can read through that. Natalie and Thomas were at the end of section 4. I ran through the last stuff after the water things, recognizing that most of that was in the ordinance before, and so we just went through it quickly with the understanding that the study commission is going to read it through more thoroughly before the next meeting. Was there anything in there that you guys wanted to give any analysis or thoughts on?
I don't think so. Thomas, do you have any thoughts?
Nope, I don't think so.
Okay. Article 5, this is corporate powers. This is also language that was from the original ordinance. It's been altered slightly based on stuff we've learned in court decisions recently. But it's basically saying that corporations that violate the charter, or that tend to violate it, don't have certain rights and protections that they claim under the law. It's really drawing out into the open the fight, which is who makes the decisions here? Is it the corporations or is it the people that live here? It's basically saying that corporations still do have protections as business entities as long as they're not trying to use those protections to violate your rights. Questions on that?
No.
Okay, we're getting into the nitty-gritty here. I'm sure everybody's real excited for it at this point, but I need to give a quick overview on initiative and referendum, charter amendment, emergency town meeting, stuff like that. Because sometimes I think the conversation gets confused. But basically, if this charter gets voted in, the charter becomes the constitution of Highland Township. It's the fundamental governing document. It outlines rights, it outlines values and priorities. Those values and priorities then basically box in your supervisors and give them instructions for what they can and cannot do. It creates the DNA. It's the foundation for lawmaking and for life and governance in the township. You can think about it at the state level, which is we have the state Pennsylvania Constitution that provides certain declaration of rights. It provides other instructions. what the form of government's going to look like, and that then provides the foundation for our legislators in Harrisburg to pass state laws, state statutes. So they're guided by the Constitution as they pass these laws, in the same way that your supervisors would be guided by this home rule charter as they pass ordinances or make other decisions within the township. As we know, the legislators don't always carry out the will of the people, and so the question is, how do we hold them accountable? At the state level, the idea is that you can change the Constitution. It's very difficult to do that in Pennsylvania, that you can change the Constitution to make sure that your legislators are doing what it is that you want them to do. In the same way, if you take out the recall provision in this charter, your question is, how do you hold the supervisors accountable if they're making decisions that aren't in alignment with what the people of the township want? There's essentially three different options here. There may be more, but we outlined it into three different things. One is charter amendment itself. And so that is where the charter that you're looking at, if this gets enacted, you can amend that later on to put in new provisions that would force your supervisors to act in accordance with the will of the people that voted those in. The charter amendment process is defined under state law. Just by virtue of having a charter, you have the ability to amend it as the people. You can go over the supervisors' heads and you can amend the charter to make sure that they are acting in accordance with the wishes of the people. The state law process spells that out. It says you have to gather signatures on a petition equal to 10% of the people that voted in the last gubernatorial election. There's a certain time frame that you have for that. It's usually 7 weeks to gather those signatures, and you can vote on things to amend the charter twice a year, once in the spring and once in the November elections. So it does limit you in some respects with the charter amendment process, because you have to go through the signature gathering process and all of that, and you can only vote on things twice a year to amend the charter. Some folks have also been talking about initiative and referendum. Initiative and referendum generally applies to ordinances. So ordinances are subservient to the charter. The charter is the Constitution. The ordinances are like the state statutes. The ordinances are the laws that your supervisors can pass. If your supervisors pass an ordinance that you don't like, you can amend the charter later on in order to, correct the inconsistency or the thing you don't like, but it may take some time. Some folks have proposed having an initiative and referendum process for ordinances, whereby you maybe would have a higher signature gathering threshold or something like that, 20 or 30 or 40% of the signatures. The question is really, what does that get you? You're at the same, you would only be able to vote on that, in the spring and the fall as well. And ordinances in general are, under the law, they're weaker because they're constrained by the charter. And so it's not out of the ordinary to have an initiative and a referendum process for ordinances. The question is, what does that get you if you can amend the charter? But we do want to distinguish between amendment of the charter and ordinances that can be done by initiative as well. Is that distinction clear? It's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo, but they're two different things. And ordinances are generally, they're subservient to the charter itself. So the question is, what would an initiative and referendum process for ordinances get you, is one question. The third thing that was developed in Grant Township as sort of a compromise here was what was called an emergency town meeting process, whereby the Grant folks that were on the Government Study Commission said, all right, we're pretty content with the charter amendment process, but what happens if some big nasty threat comes along and we don't have the time to gather the signatures we need, and if this big threat's going to come in before the election cycle in either May or in November? They used like a sewage sludge or a toxic waste incinerator, something like that as their example. They said, what if this thing's permitted? It's scheduled to go in February. We can't vote again until May, and so we need a process immediately whereby we can deal with these things. And they came up with this emergency town meeting process. It's a high bar. The language is spelled out in Section 6, or Article 6, all the sections there. I'm just going to run through it very quickly, and then we'll go back and parse out all of these conversations a bit more. But the emergency town meeting process basically says, if something big and nasty is coming in that would affect your health and safety, a person that lives within the township can initiate a petition, and they have 15 days to gather signatures on that petition. And they have to get signatures equal to 30% of the registered voters in the township. Not just the people that voted at the last gubernatorial election, actual registered voters. In Highland Township, that's about 310 voters. 30% of that is about 100 people. So you have 15, and you can change all of this as well. I'm just telling you what the process was in Grant Township. This is a placeholder. They wanted it to be difficult, and they wanted it to be a true emergency in order for this process to be kicked in. So you have 15 days to gather about 100 signatures in Highland Township if you use that threshold. Once that happens, an emergency town meeting committee forms, And that committee in Grant Township, what they came up with was representatives. It was going to be the secretary, the chairman of the board, a township auditor, a tax collector, and the person that initiated the petition. So it was going to be a committee of 5 people. That committee of 5 people is spelled out in here. You can change that. You can do other things if you want to do this process at all. I'm just running through it quickly, what they did in Grant. That committee process then has to certify the signatures. They come together and they look to see if enough signatures were gathered. They have 10 days to actually determine whether enough signatures were gathered. If they then decide that enough signatures were gathered, they have to call a town meeting within 15 days. So maximum time frame here is about 40 days of what they did in Grant Township. 15 days to gather signatures, 10 days to count the signatures, 15 days where the meeting is called. At that meeting that is then called, the people of the township can come together and actually decide to vote in an ordinance on the spot. And it would be through the issuance of ballots that are then placed and counted in public that night. There would be mailings that would be sent out to every registered voter within the township, informing them of the meeting that there would be a vote. And if that then is voted in that night, that ordinance would take effect until the next election. So say it happened in February, that ordinance would take place in February, and it would be the law of the township, and then there would be an actual vote on it to amend the charter at the May election. It would be forced to be put up. So that's a hell of a lot of stuff in a short amount of time. It's all spelled out in detail there, but that's how the emergency town meeting process in Grant worked. They decided not to do initiative and referendum for ordinances. They had the charter amendment process, and then the emergency town meeting process was intended as a stopgap in case something big came in that they needed to deal with before they had the time to do it at the May or the November elections. So, deep breath. That's kind of the overview for holding the elected officials accountable if they're not acting in your best interest in terms of charter amendment, town meetings, things like that. Questions on any of that before we get into some of the merits or ideas on it? Okay. Natalie, I just went through and laid out kind of the differences between charter amendment, ordinance, initiative and referendum, and the emergency town meeting process. Did you have any legal stuff to offer on that?
Sure, and this is probably tied into section 701 of the document, of the draft charter right now. A couple of different thoughts to add on. I think the reception was working well, so I heard you lay out the distinction between amending the home rule charter versus passing the ordinance via initiative and referendum, and the third possibility of checking legislative power via the emergency town meeting provision. A couple of thoughts regarding the initiative and referendum and the home rule charter provision as well. One of the questions that had come up was regarding the signature threshold that people would need to meet in order to be able to propose legislation either for an amendment to a home rule charter or for an initiative and referendum process, i.e. putting a ballot, putting an ordinance on the ballot for citizens to vote on. So I'll address the home rule charter first, and then I'll talk a little bit about the initiative and referendum process. And feel free to stop me if there are questions as I go along, because these two processes, but it's easy to confuse them because they can be very similar. With the home rule charter amendment process, the state statute, the home rule code, lays out a process to actually go about amending the home rule charter. And it establishes the signature threshold at 10%. That number does not appear to be something that can either be increased or decreased, and so 10% to amend the home rule charter is what things are at. The process that the home rule code lays out is fairly straightforward in terms of how people actually go about amending the home rule charter. Another thing to consider as well, and Chad may have mentioned this and I just didn't hear him, a home rule charter, it's like the constitution of the community, but there's also something else to keep in mind. Home rule charters in Pennsylvania enjoy the same legal weight as a state statute. So that's different than, say, a municipal ordinance, which is a local law. So that means that anytime you amend your home rule charter, the amendment to that home rule charter also carries the weight of state law as well. So that's the home rule charter amendment process. Now, considering the initiative and referendum process, a home rule municipality does have the option, it appears, of setting up their own initiative and referendum process for passing ordinances. There's no real guide path for how to go about doing something like that. And constructing a process like that out of whole cloth that could take some time, and I don't know how much time that would take. And I know folks have talked about wanting to get this in for the upcoming election, so that's something to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind, too, is that with the initiative and referendum process, whereby you go about putting ordinances up for a vote, those ordinances don't have the increased legal weight that an amendment to the home rule charter would have, because they are essentially municipal ordinances. Does that make sense?
Any questions?
So she said the initiative and referendum, they have less weight than if they were, home rule?
Ordinances have less weight than amendments to the charter.
Okay.
And what she's saying is that if you wanted to create an initiative and referendum process for ordinances, it's going to take some time to do, because you have to come up with the new signature thresholds, and it's not the same as amending the charter. We can probably do it. We don't know if we have enough time at this point, but the question is, what tools do you want to be able to have citizens' voices heard and have it take the force of law? We've outlined 3. There may be others if you have ideas, but basically the 3 in front of you right now that we've outlined tonight are the emergency town meeting process, potential for initiative and referendum and ordinances, which would have to be created, and then charter amendment itself, which is just a part of your charter. If this gets adopted, you have that authority under state law already. And you don't have to make decisions tonight. The only thing that, we probably, and you may want to read through that emergency town meeting process and do things like that, from a time constraint perspective, if you wanted an initiative and a referendum process for ordinances, that is something that we would have to create and do some research on, and maybe a bit of time. So,
Now, if it isn't there for ordinances, you said we could still do something with an amendment in initiative, okay.
so if your supervisors pass an ordinance you don't like, or if they don't pass an ordinance that you want them to pass and they don't act, then you can amend the charter to actually remedy that or to put into place what you want. But the downside of that is that the charter amendment process only happens twice a year. And that's why for the grant folks, they wanted the emergency town meeting process in case there was something extremely important. You'd have to be very motivated. It would have to be something that was going to garner a lot of support in order to make it work. That was their stopgap measure, saying, all right, we're going to give the supervisors the ability to do their jobs most of the time, and they can pass ordinances and make laws and do the day-to-day functioning. Mostly ordinances are about things like road bonds or burn days and things like that. That's, ordinances don't usually deal with the bigger issues. Sometimes they do. But they were like, all right, charter amendment process is fine. We have the emergency process if something egregious comes up before we have time to deal with it through the vote process. So, and then they said, we're going to leave the ordinances to the governing body to deal with. And if they pass a crappy ordinance, then we will take it away from them at the next election.
That sound like there's 3 options. Or
Yeah.
you guys thinking of more? Or would that
That
be all right?
sounds fine.
That sounds good.
Yeah. That's fine.
Well, the question is whether to do an initiative and referendum process for ordinances, because that's currently not in here, and that's something we're going to have to
For
develop.
ordinances, okay.
And as Natalie outlined, there's a question of what that does for you, because ordinances, even if you propose that via initiative and referendum, the supervisors can repeal ordinances. Supervisors have the authority to propose and repeal ordinances. You would have the opportunity to propose and repeal, or to propose ordinances and potentially repeal them. The question is, if you want to go through all the effort of gathering signatures, putting it up for a vote as an ordinance, only to have the supervisors be able to repeal it, that's one thing to consider. A charter amendment, the supervisors can't repeal. That's the
We
Constitution.
should basically trump it with a charter amendment.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, so do we want to forego that, the initiative for ordinances?
I think so, John.
I think, as long as we have that emergency.
Yeah, because you're saying it's weak anyway, because they can trump it, but, okay.
Right.
And that will also stop the mayhem and chaos of people just bringing BS ordinances to
Right.
the township.
I agree with you.
Yeah, so we're willing to forego that then?
General agreement about foregoing the INR initiative referendum for ordinances?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Regarding the emergency town meeting process, I outlined it very quickly. It's a pretty complex process. It makes sense logically if you read it through, but you may want a different signature threshold, or you may want a different makeup on that emergency town meeting committee. Read through it and see if there's tweaks or alterations that you want. I basically just wrote the draft language that's applied from Grant Townships, but it's yours to make as you want it. Any other questions on amending or holding your supervisors accountable? Okay. Okay, moving on, we're almost through this thing. Section 701 is the amendment process. That is basically the one that's outlined in state law. It just it says, you know, use the existing state process in the Home Rule Code to amend the charter. Section 702 is severability. It says that if a court strikes down any provisions of the charter, that it's understood that the rest of the charter remains in effect. So it severs it out if something's taken out. Article 8, call for constitutional changes. This is just advisory language saying that, and you don't have to keep this in, you can change it, but it's basically saying through the adoption of this charter, we call for amendment of the Pennsylvania Constitution and the federal Constitution to recognize a right of local community self-government, free from governmental restriction, preemption, or nullification by corporate rights and powers. Those are basically the things that Seneca was trying to use against you, and this is saying that we don't want to continue to be on the receiving end of crap like this. We would like, you know, for there to be changes made at the state and federal level in alignment with the ones that we're making. So you can ruminate on that, and you know, it basically is a statement of intent, and it's advisory, so if you like it or you want to change it, you can let us know. The definition section is outlining what certain things mean within the document. So, you know, there's the prohibition in section 401 on the depositing waste from oil and gas extraction. That's actually defined there. It's basically the same definition that was in your ordinance, but you can read through the definitions. But usually we just want to make sure that we're clear about what we mean with certain parts of it.
On definitions, the extraction, and that's how it's worded, is the extraction. Wouldn't it have to be more? Okay, I have to read it. Let me read it better, I'm sorry.
Okay. Anything else on this charter? I do have a couple of other points that I wanted to bring up, but I think we're through the draft.
Yeah.
Have we beat it up enough?
Yeah. You still have a question on it? Or the definition? Right.
So 3 other topics on that list that I originally handed out earlier in the meeting says for further consideration. There was question about the fire department and whether that was something that you folks wanted to put in here in terms of protecting a viable fire department and what that means. We need to know, we're unclear on what it was that was being asked, and we need to know what it is that you may want, if anything.
Did you copy that, what I sent you? Does that have any validity of what you're looking for? And
I think
should I get a copy of it?
we have to be able to further define the word viable fire, well, the phrase viable fire department. We don't want that to hurt. You know, we have to be, we need to further define viable fire department before we actually put it in the charter.
I know, we're having a heck of a time defining,
Yeah,
and even finding anything.
we need a
defining.
definition for that. I mean, everywhere I find it tells me, look here, look there, and I'm
Yeah.
looking here and there, and it's not here and there.
And everything I saw was how to run a volunteer fire department. You know, there was nothing, no
Yeah.
definite definition of what a viable fire department is.
So do you guys want to table that till the next meeting?
Yeah, it needs further review, in my opinion.
And also just to say that if you bring something to us, we would probably have to research it still, and, you know, we would have to offer an opinion on it. So, but we need to know first what it is that you're trying to protect and do with it, so. Matt, did you have a question?
Yeah, in 401, is that how Grand Strip Brook there's up to?
Yep.
What we're looking to do here, wouldn't that help? If we told them what our means.
What's the question?
Wait, the question was on, they actually made it illegal to extract gas. It was part of their, see, I'm kind of confused, that's why I asked that. The depositing of waste from oil and gas extraction. Okay, I got it now, because it's from gas extraction.
Yeah, then you define the
Yeah,
track
that's,
back, yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, sir.
Yeah, I get it too. I'm sorry.
Yeah, now that I read it 3
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting tired.
Well, it's hard to correlate that unless you've really seen that.
There was also a question at one point about supervisor salaries, and I don't think we were clear on what it was that was being asked for, in terms of amounts or number of meetings or things like that, or if that's something.
Well, that's pretty well straightforward. They can only get so much. I mean, I think what's the lump sum, Missy? It's like $1,000 or $2,000, something like that, roughly.
1,800 and some.
Yeah, $1,800.
Or 1,800,
So
yeah.
they're allowed.
They're allowed, and however they want to deposit over.
While you're looking for that, Misty, can I ask you a question, Chad? No? Okay. Well, of course, we all had a big scare because of the supervisors dropping the ordinance. And there was some speculation that we could not do anything about it, but clearly that's been cleared up tonight. Right? Okay.
It was due to like non-lawyers like me reading it and trying to make what I thought out of it, and wow,
Yeah.
I couldn't
Yeah.
sleep that
Yeah,
night.
'cause
Yeah.
we were, we were very worried. We want to do what's right for the community, but, we were also thinking, oh my gosh. So,
They wanted, it's like,
And
yeah,
it's between the propaganda
Intimidation.
from Seneca, what all they're saying, that they got people out there telling people this and.
so
going around
basically
and-
what I'm saying is, we are okay to move on with this.
Are
We can do this.
we can still do this, but are we the last line of defense because there is going to be no intermediate motion now?
Well,
Right.
that's why they hurried
One
up the
thing
process.
That's why they hurried up and did it.
one
yeah.
thing I was gonna bring up tonight is we need to get with the water authority soon, within the next couple of days, and have them write a letter to DEP as soon as possible.
We don't as a home rule charter, that's not our
I
job.
already talked to
I
them
know that,
about
but
it.
we need to suggest it or something.
I read their last
Mr.
one.
Wolf, Mr. Wolf made it.
Right.
I'm good. Can we finish up with the charter stuff, the DEP? No, sorry. Did you have a, was
No,
there a question?
I just I wanted to make sure that we were okay to go forward.
Yeah, they had us feeling that we were all gonna lose our homes.
Yeah.
So what's the,
The question is, I know that the township was being sued by Seneca with this ordinance. Now that it's dropped, and in return, we're gonna go ahead and put it in the charter, we're looking at probably looking at the same process of them suing us again.
Challenging it, you know.
Yeah, challenging it.
Yes.
Okay. But it's as a Highland Township as a whole, not individuals.
right.
Okay.
Natalie Thomas, you there?
Yes.
Okay. So the question is regarding the adoption of the charter and,
Is there a question?
yeah, can you hear me?
No, can't hear the question, but we are here.
Okay. Can you hear me right now?
Yes.
Okay. The question is, in moving forward with the charter, and I think it was adopted early, or it was addressed earlier tonight regarding the consent decree stuff, but the question is, if it moves forward and if there's a challenge again from Seneca Resources, that is against the township and not against individuals. Is that correct? That's the question.
Yeah, the lawsuit, anyone can sue anyone for anything. Like, I'll repeat that again, that's the general wisdom in the legal circle. We live in a litigious society, but yes, it would be brought against the township. Thomas, do you have any thoughts?
No, the defendant in the action challenging provisions of the Home Rule Charter would be brought against the township as the municipal corporation itself. Technically, after the charter is adopted or voted down, the Government Study Commission no longer exists, so as an entity, it's no longer there. And the township is the relevant defendant in any kind of action, such as one challenging the injection provision.
Okay. Thank you.
That explains a lot, because they've been telling us a lot of stuff at these township meetings, that if we do all of this, we're responsible for it.
Well, not only that, some people have been cornered personally,
Yes.
and I just felt better hearing that. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, so Natalie Thomas, they're saying that there's people have been approached on a government study commission and being told that they're going to be personally responsible for what's in the charter if it's adopted. So that's also part 2 of that question.
The people are the ones that actually vote on the charter. So the people of the township are the ones that have the ultimate authority whether to adopt the charter or not. It sounds like bullying tactics to me. I'm happy to research it if people would like, but I think that just sounds like scare tactics and bullying. And a classic case of it.
And because the whole township votes on it, there's no liability of us being on this board for what is written into this, because everybody has to vote on it. We cannot be held personally responsible, i.e. because we drafted the charter. Could Seneca take out some kind of defamation suit on us because we composed the charter?
The question is, those drafting the charter and the study commission, could there be some sort of defamation lawsuit or something from Seneca towards those that are serving on the government study commission? Or could they otherwise be personally responsible in something like that?
For defamation?
That was the question, but they basically said it's anything. I think it's the question, would there be personal consequences to government study commission members? Question is, would there be personal consequences to government study commission members for what's in the charter and for doing the drafting?
I see. None that I know of. I am happy to look into that further, but none that I know of. For defamation, certainly not, because defamation goes to an actual character attack on a specific person, and the Home Rule Charter certainly is not about anything like that. Yeah, I'm happy to look into it, but I don't see anything that comes to mind. Tom, do you?
Nope. It's the ground. I mean, when people allege those types of things, it has no basis in the law. Going back to what Natalie said, however, is that anybody can sue anybody for anything at any time. So, not because of your status as government study commission members, but any member of the community that Seneca wants to bring a lawsuit against, they can file something. Doesn't mean it has merit, but the problem with the legal system as it now exists is that if you're on the receiving end of something, you have to get yourself out of it. And so Seneca at any time, or any other corporation for that matter, or any individual for that matter, could bring a lawsuit against you. Doesn't mean it has merit, but it puts you on the defensive and receiving end. But status as government study commission members does not put you in any more worse position than any individual member of the township. And in terms of defamation and libel, that comes down to, other standards that are not contingent on what's being drafted in the charter. That again, Seneca could bring up a lawsuit against anybody for saying something that Seneca doesn't like. And again, it doesn't mean it has merit or will succeed, but it's a fact of the legal system that anybody can sue anybody for anything.
Okay. All right. Did we get anywhere with the supervisor salaries question?
I found it in the second-class township code. Supervisors may receive compensation in an amount established by an ordinance, but not in excess of the following. For township population of not more than 4,999, the annual maximum compensation is $1,875 a year. Do we want to further limit that, is the question.
I think if we further limit it, we're not gonna get anyone who wants to run for supervisor. I mean, they have to have some kind of reward for going through their burdens, I guess, for lack of a better word.
I'm staying neutral on that because I have my own opinion and
Toils.
nobody wants to hear it.
Well, that's a first.
You're getting mad, boy, there.
I'm getting those vibes.
No, because I got my own opinion. And
He's really trying to get it out
He
there.
wants somebody to say, what is it? None of us are.
Because they just got into a huge argument last year with the supervisors.
Well, he's gonna
that
tell you
were-
his opinion anyway.
No.
So,
So we're,
So the question is,
Do
do
we
we
wanna
want to
forget
further
about it?
limit the salaries?
it's 1,800 and what?
$1,875 according to second-class township code.
It's really not much for all the BS
Yeah.
they have to go through
My
and
opinion,
put up
I-
with.
yes.
That's a year?
They did,
That's a year.
do it to them.
That's not what this is all about, though.
Yeah, it's not vengeance.
No, would you wanna go through what they go through for that, for less than that?
Engage.
I know, you think after 5 years I'd learn, but you
I
know.
already do it now.
Just to, just like you being in the fire department, it's a volunteer position. You do it because you want to do it. You want to do it because it's the best, it's for the community. So,
Akin to things like, if you're going to use that example with the fire department, there are a certain amount of costs that is associated with that volunteer position. Like my paper, my ink, my time, my pens, my pencils, those kinds of things that we don't get reimbursed for. And that a salary would help defer some of that cost.
I say if the supervisor can do it, then the fire department ought to be able to do it.
I gotta hold my mouth.
It
I'm
breaks
holding
down.
my mouth.
You have to stay neutral on this because you're chief fire department.
That breaks down like $156 a month
I have to.
is what they're,
Excuse me, what'd you say? How much?
that breaks down around like $150, $160 a month. I mean, at a maximum that they could be paid.
Yeah,
So
I think,
think that's,
Now, does that include like special meetings?
That's
yeah,
total.
that's
That's including
total
Visible,
supervisor
Everything.
salary.
100 meetings, that's all the more they can get compensated by.
Travel expense, all that.
No.
I know they're able to get,
Reimbursed for mileage.
And they go to,
Yeah,
yeah,
on the state.
conferences and stuff.
per mile, and they're also allowed to get $50 when they go to like the conferences, $50 a day, or if they are salary, whatever they get per
Whatever
day
salary.
for salary, yeah. So I don't think it's,
I think
So-
I'm divided.
I don't want to touch it myself.
I don't either.
Don't
like a
look
vote
at
here?
me, I'm out of this. I got my
against it.
opinion and
raise your hand if you're for it,
Or
For
keeping
what?
it,
forget about it.
Or for, yeah.
Forgetting about this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
You're outvoted.
That's okay.
okay. Yeah, we're not worried about it.
Supervisor salaries, we're not worried about.
Okay, supervisors' salaries off the table.
As long as they're limited by the second class township code.
Right.
That's what's in the charter currently, unless it's otherwise defined.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, the last piece I had on here was citizen enforcement. In Grant Township, they basically, they discussed that the courts may not eventually uphold the thing that they may want. The courts may sell them out, basically. And so earlier this year, they passed what was called a direct action ordinance, where they legalized nonviolent direct action to protect the community's rights if the courts would not. And so they basically said that, if folks are acting nonviolently to stop trucks, for example, from coming in, that was okay within the township as long as it was in the confines of the rights and the prohibitions of the charter. The question is if something like that is of interest to you. I mean, we just bring it up because it's happened in other places and it's happened in Grant and it was on a similar issue. So just want to see what you wanted in terms of citizen enforcement, if anything.
So this would say that we have the right to, I think I was reading up on it or looking at it, like civil disobedience. And would we be protected?
Right,
If
so
we
the
did that?
ordinance in Grant says that folks that, they don't really call it disobedience, it's direct action, because they're basically saying we're directly enforcing our law if the courts won't protect our rights.
Okay.
And so they're saying that we have the authority to protect our rights if the courts won't, and that folks that are protecting the rights are not able to be arrested for that, and if they are arrested, that they need to have the charges dropped immediately. That's what the ordinance says,
Okay.
so.
I like that.
I agree with that one.
I need more information on it.
Basically, if we, what's another thing about it? You said, for example, another example?
It's got two operative provisions in there. It says that folks that live within the township have a right to directly enforce the charter, the rights and the prohibitions, if a court fails to do so. And the two operative parts are that people are shielded from arrest for the direct action, the nonviolent direct action, and that if they are arrested, that any relevant court needs to drop the charges immediately. And so that's what the language says. It hasn't been tested. We don't know, really where that's at. But that's what the language says in Grant Township. If you want more information, we can get it and bring it to the next meeting. I can ask. Natalie and Thomas, we're discussing the Grant Township direct action stuff right now, and the possibility of that being in Highland as well. Do you have any perspective to offer on that?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's the question that folks have before them is one where people get to wrestle with the reality of the fact that the courts sometimes are complicit in actually violating the rights of people in the community. And so what happens when the court actually works hand in hand to help violate a community's right to govern itself and to protect itself? That's a pretty big question, and one that might be something that you folks face at some point in the future. And so I think the folks in Grant Township went through, a pretty big conversation amongst themselves, talking about what they believe is the just and the moral thing when it comes to actually being able to protect their water. And they decided that being able to directly enforce their charter using nonviolent direct action was something that they wanted to let people know they were willing to do, and to protect people who are interested in using nonviolent direct action. So that's sort of the impetus that came out of the Grant Township ordinance. Thomas, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, sure. I think that's what means peering into the future. We've already had federal court strike down portions of the Grant Township ordinance, including the prohibition on injection wells. And so, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, depending on how things fall out, you're going to have to live with this charter if it's adopted by the people of Highland, for a long time. And assuming, some of this comes down to how badly you want to stop the injection well, but assuming that you're at a point where the only thing that's going to stop the injection well is people sitting down on the site or blocking construction equipment or doing whatever you need to do to actually stop the company from doing what they want to do. The question is, if you find yourself in that position, you want something protective of yourselves from the criminal law, which then kicks in to arrest people who actually try to stop pipelines and other projects. And because of that, Grant and has been proposed here in Spokane, Washington, in an ordinance that's been proposed to the City Council about saying that we're not going to use governmental resources to pursue you or to arrest you or to book you or to arraign you if you decide to do direct action to directly enforce the provisions of the charter. In some ways, it comes down to how much you believe in what you wrote. And if you think that you have the rights that are within the charter that you wrote, and the courts are not defending or enforcing those rights, then it's unfortunate, but many communities have come to the conclusion that they have to do it themselves, and that means running afoul of the criminal legal provisions that are in the law. And if you find yourself in a situation where that becomes necessary, then it's always made sense to us that groups pursue inclusion of provisions that actually can be used to protect themselves in the event that something like that becomes necessary. So, again, it's almost like peering into the future, but you got to figure out what position you may end up in 3, 4, 5 years from now, and what kind of protections that you want in place, so that when you take the actions that you feel are necessary, that the whole institution of criminal justice doesn't crash down on you, and that you begin to reconfigure what that criminal justice system does in light of people enforcing their own rights within their own communities. So it's one of these big, huge questions about what to include and whether to put language like that in, but it depends on where you guys see yourselves down the road and what kind of protections you think might be necessary to insulate you in case those types of contingencies become necessary.
I understand that and agree. I mean, you
Yeah.
guys wanna vote on that? I mean, I agree with it.
Oh, yeah,
Show
I
of
do
hands,
too.
who wants
Show of hands, I agree with it.
I agree.
What are we agreeing on? Sorry, I'm like,
7 of us commissioners,
Zoned out.
I did.
opinion on it?
I was like trying to think of the opposite of the cause and effect. Everything has a good and a bad. I can just see people standing in the middle of 66, holding hands, singing Kumbaya.
Yeah,
You know,
That's a different story.
but there's a
'cause
protection.
66 is a
We'd be
state
in
road.
front of the injection
It's
well
not a
doing this.
Highland Township road.
And if the cops came,
Geez, now Bill's away.
which they would, we would be protected underneath, because we are trying to keep our constitution.
Right.
We're
We're just
defending our
protecting
constitution.
what's in the charter.
I'm just, like I said,
I know.
there's another side to
I
that I
know.
just have
The
not.
other side, if we
thought
don't
of.
have something like that, we would go to jail. If we tried to sit down in front of the truck.
Well, this hasn't been tried. It's not to say that you
Not
wouldn't.
saying it's
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
hold in the court of law.
Right.
Right.
And so, you know, I mean, we can put some of the draft language in and you guys can look at it next week and actually see how it feels and play with it.
Okay.
The other, you know, consideration is, and I don't know that it is the consideration, but it could, you know, there could be criticism of it if you put it in. Folks could say, well, you can't do that, or, you know, it's gonna be crazy having people sitting in the streets. It could go the other way, which is people could say, yeah, damn right, we do have the authority to do it. It could have, I mean, and those are decisions that you folks would have to make, and how much you believe in the charter and what you want to put forward, as well as how you think it's going to be received and how you want it to be received. So, sounds like there's decision to at least move forward with looking at it, and we can bring it
Yes.
for the next meeting.
Yes,
And you guys
I
can-
agreed to that.
Okay.
That's the end of section A, you're going to section B now, right?
For tonight's meeting? Or-
So there's a 45-minute,
Great.
public comment after
Well,
this.
you have fun with that.
That's all I had on charter stuff for tonight. Do you guys have any other questions or things that you wanted to add at this point? Actually, I'll get to that in a second. Do you have any other questions for the lawyers right now on
No.
what's going on? No. Natalie, Thomas, we are wrapping up over here with the charter discussion. There's no further questions for you guys. We have a bit more administrative stuff to do, but did you have any other things you wanted to offer or say before we let you go?
I don't know why you're wrapping up, but we're kind of early.
See,
Yeah.
the end of section B, you're
Well, I mean,
No, I don't.
You got a lot of dirty looks.
I have one last thing while we were on the phone. The legal expert on the health insurance stuff got back to me. So we have an answer on that, which is yes, you can actually divvy out health insurance coverage between full-time and part-time workers, employees. The test for whether someone is a part-time employee is whether they work 30 hours per week or less for the township, or 130 hours per month or less. So if either of the tests are not met, they can't be considered a part-time employee. But you can limit your offerage of insurance coverage depending on those classes. So you could, in other words, offer insurance coverage to full-time and not to part-time. And then within those categories, you have to offer the same type of health coverage within them. So if you decide to cover all your full-time employees, the same health package has to be offered to all of them, but you can classify them out between part-time and full-time. So that's one answer at least we have.
so 30 hours per week or less would be part-time, and 130 hours per month would be, wait, Tracy, or 130 hours per month would be part-time. Anything over that would be full-time.
Right.
Are you guys going to think on that some more then, or?
Yeah.
Okay, anything else from the lawyers?
That's what I have.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Still good?
Wow, awesome.
Okay, a couple of other things from me. I know we've mentioned in the past, the final report is gonna be due with the finalization of this charter. That was included in some of the Grant Township materials that sent you. I know Misty has already been looking at that, but, and if you're meeting a bunch over the next, week or so, or a couple of weeks, that's good. But just to say that there is one that needs to be done. Let us know if you need anything, but a lot of that is gonna be based on your own internal accounting and calculations and records that you've kept. And so just, it's good not to let that wait till the last minute. We're happy to review it and offer any perspective, but,
When does that do?
it's gotta be submitted with the final charter. So we're using August 30th as the date. And then I know we set dates tonight, 25, 26, 29, and 30th, it looks like. I'm gonna have to check my calendar when I get home. I guess the question is whether or not you want me or Natalie at any of those meetings.
I made a motion at the last meeting that we had him here at every August meeting. Do we want to continue with that motion that we made last meeting to have a representative here or
Yeah.
available for every August meeting since we're in the crunch time? So we're going to maintain our last motion.
Okay, I know I can't be here 25, 26. I'm not sure about Natalie. I can be available to call in at those, and we'll do our best to have somebody at least available via phone for those meetings. I can be here 29, 30, but I'll run these by Natalie and we'll see what we can do. And then the only other question I had was whether or not you wanted to do another hearing. You did a hearing earlier this year, but a lot of times other study commissions present their charter to the public and say, hey, look what we've done. Do you have any other questions before we finalize, things like that. You're not required by law to do so. It's basically a question for you
If
guys.
we do, are we required to have the public comment?
You are.
Right towards the end of the meeting?
But I mean, if the public comments are, there are ways under the Sunshine Act for governing bodies to have more orderly public comments. Basically, you can limit it to 3 minutes per person, has been recognized.
We tried to do that tonight.
Yeah.
JP's not real good at limiting.
Yeah, I think we should hear their opinions. But,
So the question is if you want to do a hearing or not.
so we could probably maybe do it on the 30th.
Yeah.
Since all of them are at the townships.
We have a meeting on the 30th, I think.
Yeah, I'm saying,
That was our last meeting.
what if we made that meeting a hearing and we were able to show people the actual draft?
Why don't we do it, if we're gonna do it, JP, why don't we do it on the 29th, because the 30th, that leaves us one more meeting, enact the changes. It's up to you guys, I mean, but that just makes more sense, it makes like
I make a motion to have a hearing on the 29th.
second.
Okay. Any opposed?
No.
Oh, I would have to,
Probably it's 10 o'clock.
And so the hearing is on the 29th then, because I'll need to do up the advertisement
Yeah.
with that. The other question for you guys is if you want to send things out to people to invite them again, like you did last time. And if so, how you're going to do that and by when, so.
Tom, can you take care of that?
Well, if I have the information, yeah, we can take care of that, the same way we took care of it last time. And if you want to send the charter out, we could do that. We have quite a few pages we're allowed to send out with no extra cost.
Yeah, Tom found out that it's 3 ounces of paper per place.
Okay.
And he was thinking that we could fold them and then put like the round tape things on the end. So it's like a little pamphlet. So basically, we could basically, because we had like, what, 20 or 12 pieces of paper?
Yeah.
And we weren't even near 3 ounces.
Right.
So for like $80, we could send everybody the draft.
Yes, but the hardest part is getting a draft drafted,
Yeah.
getting something to send. That's the hardest part that I have. I don't have a problem sending it, doing all that, but.
Chad, when did Grant
what do you
Township
want
send them out? The drafts, did they send them out before?
They
or
waited
after?
till it was final.
Okay. how long would it be till it's final? It'd have to be August 30th,
It's
wouldn't
up
it?
to you guys.
Yeah.
I think we can wait till our public mailing of the charter until after it's actually submitted, as long as we have that public meeting for them to hear, see it, know what's going on. If they want their own copy,
We can have them available.
yeah, maybe we should just do the public meeting, the public, and the mailing on the public meeting, come to the public hearing. If you want a copy of the charter, you're gonna come to the public hearing. I don't think we should have that two mailings, you know what I mean? If they want it, they can come here. If they can't come here, then they can make arrangements with somebody, one of us or one of their, somebody that they talk to pick them up a copy of it. In light of trying to keep costs low, we don't want to do another two mailings if we don't have,
Right.
that's not something we have to do. Delivering it to somebody's house is taking away their responsibility and coming to the public hearing to get it.
All agree with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
So all we need is the notice, kind of like the last time.
Were there motions made on the mailings and meeting dates and hearing dates and stuff?
We made a motion on the hearing on the 29th, Matt seconded.
Now we're gonna do it on the mailer.
I'll second that.
Need a motion on the mailer, yeah.
I'll second it.
Aye.
Oh, yeah. I'm good by now.
Okay.
It's 2 hours past my bedtime.
All right, I have a motion to adjourn.
Wait, you can do the last public comment.
Oh, yeah. Last time.
comment?
Everybody looks like they're ready to go. Yeah.
You know, you have 30 seconds.
You have 3 minutes. We
No.
limited that at the beginning of the
3
meeting.
minutes.
Okay, I make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
Opposed?